Hello everyone. Tonight, we relax with a story about a summer you definitely don't want to experience. No sunscreen, no air conditioning, and forget about ice cream or swimming pools. You step out of your wood and straw hut, the roof so low you could bump into a spider's nest if you raise your head. The sun is so bright you squint. But that's just the beginning of the nightmare that is medieval summer. The village roads are dusty, narrow, paved with uneven stones like ankle traps. You walk amid the rustling sounds of naked children, running around, and the shirtless adults, sweat dripping down, covered in dust like clay statues. But it is the smell that makes you want to return to the straw bed. The smell of human excrement from the chamber pots overflowing into the public sewers, mixed with the smell of rotting food, sun-dried horse manure, and the stench of rotting fabric. No one uses the word sanitation in their everyday vocabulary. Summer makes things rot faster, and cities, whether small villages or crowded neighborhoods, become a living microbial soup. There are so-called open sewers that run through many streets. You've seen them, shallow, dark brown channels, always slimy, into which people casually dump both urine and hand wash. Historians still debate whether it was a conscious design or the result of collective incompetence. You walk quickly, avoiding puddles of unidentifiable water. Your shoes, rough, thin leather, torn at the heels. Each step is sprinkled with surprise. One step, you step into muddy trash. Another may be last week's rotting rat carcass. Someone in the distance yelps, having slipped in the human mud. The sun continues to beat down on you, relentless. And if you think you can find some shade to rest, you are mistaken. Most of the trees in the village have been cut down for firewood. The houses are thatched and have small porches, but underneath it is as hot as an oven. You sit down on the steps, trying to breathe, but the air is thick as glue. Mixed with the smell of human breath and rust and ashes, the villagers were used to the smell. They even recognized each other by their own smell. Oh, Uncle Giles smells like half yeast and half rotten cabbage. A joke you'd heard from the onion seller, but you weren't used to it, and your stomach was churning. The official event of that summer. A heat wave recorded in southern England in 1303, causing crops to wither and people to starve. Chronicles even recorded a bloody sun for 10 days. Some believed it was a punishment from God, others blamed the Jews. But you're more preoccupied with the immediate problem, how to survive the afternoon without passing out from dehydration. Remember, drinking dirty water is just as dangerous as not drinking at all. You glance at the bucket on the corner that the villagers used to draw water. A dead rat is floating in it like a decoration. As your mind reels, hear the church bells ring. It's not the call to prayer. It's noon, which means you have another half day to endure in this scorching heat. And no, there's no time for a siesta. Farmers are working. Craftsmen are chiseling. Vendors are touting their wares as if they're the most delicious thing you've ever seen. Perhaps. The only thing that was interesting was that the kids were playing a game. They dared each other to sniff closest to the manhole without vomiting. The winner got half a raw onion as a prize. You might laugh, but right now, it seemed like the best part of the summer. You walk through the sun-baked village, your throat parched, but it's not the thirst that bothers you more. It's the sweat which clings to your skin like a layer of grease mixed with dirt, salt, and sometimes maggots. Yes, maggots. They don't wait for you to die, but seek out the folds of skin, the small scratches, the airless spaces beneath your sodden clothing. Your clothes, made of wool or coarse linen, are as heavy as an old soaked carpet. There is no such thing as soft cotton, and you have no change of clothes. One. Just one. If they are dirty, you wash them in the river. But in the summer, the river is shallow. The water is as muddy as fish soup, and they are not necessarily cleaner than when you first wash them. So most of them are worn as they are wet, dirty, smelling like someone hid a piece of rotten cheese in their pocket. You pass a stone wall where several men are carrying boulders in the sun. They are shirtless, but instead of lightness, they are covered in blisters and welts and red-baked skin. One man, Thomas I think, puts down his boulder and lets out a soft cry. His shoulder is deeply cut, and blood is seeping through his sunburned skin, but no one stops. If he stops, he could lose his day's work. Medieval summer wasn't a vacation, it was a war. You had to fight the weather, the bugs, your own body. Historians still debate whether there were any cooling methods during this period. Some accounts say the rich hung wet cloths from their windows, while others say that's an embellished legend. You just wish for a breeze, but no wind, only flies. Hundreds of them buzzing in your ears, in your eyes, settling on the festering scratch on your knee. They cling to your hair, to the corners of your lips, even crawling around the corners of your eyes. You see a child swatting flies from his leg with a straw hat, but the hat itself is full of dead flies. You want to wash your face? But clean water is as rare as gold. The well water tastes metallic, and sometimes there is a scum floating on the surface. The villagers say just boil it and it will be fine. You don't have any firewood, and even if you did, what would you do with half a bucket of boiling water in the 100-degree heat? You stop by the stables. It's actually cooler than outside because of the shade. But the smell of ammonia hits you in the face. Hold your breath and sit down on a patch of hay where some cats are watching for mice. A cow comes over and puffs on your face. At least it doesn't complain. Your body isn't just tired, it's literally rotting away. Workers like you often suffer from dermatitis, boils, blisters, and even cases of parasites burrowing under the skin. An old man in the village tells you that when he was young, he used a hot needle to cook maggots out of his back. You laugh it off. But there's a strange swelling behind your ear that itches. As you scratch, you recall the story of the Black Death that swept through this region less than a century ago. They say it was caused by rats, or fleas, or both. In fact, scholars still debate fiercely today. Did the disease come from Asia? Was it maritime trade? Or was it filthy living conditions? You don't need to know the cause. You just know that summer insect bites are like fateful lottery tickets. A villager, Mrs. Agnes, had just had a swollen face after being bitten by a mosquito. The herbalist said it was the cold seeping into the blood. 2 days later, she developed a high fever and died. You stand up, brushing the straw off your ass. The sweat has dried into a crust of salt on your skin. When you move, it feels like sandpaper against your armpit. A louse falls from your collar onto the back of your hand. You sigh, squeeze it to make it pop, and keep walking. Dinner is still a long way off. You still have a long afternoon to get through. Remember the joke about the person who smells like raw onions mixed with burnt skin? Now people are starting to say that about you. You trudge through the narrow alley, swatting away flies and trying not to look at the dark puddles where someone might have just taken a shower. Thirst grips you like an invisible collar. Can you find clean water in this scorching summer? Remember the bucket of water from the well yesterday? It smelled like rusted steel mixed with moss. The kids had been playing with it and had blistered scalps. But you had no choice. The village well is in the middle of the square, a deep stone pit with a pulley and an iron bucket, but the walls are covered with moss. Today there is a long line of people waiting their turn. You squeeze in, sweat running down your back, the smell of people rising. When it is your turn, you have pulled up half a bucket of water when you notice something floating in it. A piece of moldy bread, a piece of cloth, or something worse. You gingerly take a small sip. The water is warm and viscous, like thin cold. Meat soup. You close your eyes and swallow, trying not to throw up. An old man next to you tells you, just add a few drops of vinegar and it will be clean. But where does your family get vinegar? You choke on your laughter, tears threatening to well up in your eyes. Some villagers have learned to collect rainwater, using coarse cloth stretched across the thatched roofs of their houses, catching each drop in a bowl. But the sun has been blazing hot all week. The last rain must have fallen last season. You tried to get water from the small creek that runs through the village, but now it is just a thick, muddy patch where dead rats swell and flies gather like they are having a festival. The big event that people still talk about that year was the drought of 1334 in Flanders. That summer, not a drop of rain fell. Crops died, livestock became emaciated, and people had to dig deeper wells just to get dirtier water. Some historians now believe that this was one of the indirect causes of the plague that would follow decades later when people were already weakened by dehydration and malnutrition. You are not a scholar. You are just thirsty. And the danger is extreme thirst can make you reckless. People have even drunk stagnant spring water from the cemetery near their village. They survived, but a few days later, they suffered from such severe stomach pain that they died in the chicken coop. The doctor said it was a snake bite, but it was actually diarrhea. You shudder. That is not how you want to end your summer. You recall the folk tales of ghost water, the strangely clear water that makes you forget your own name when you drink it. A village child once disappeared after drinking water from a cave near the forest. It was rumored that she was taken to live with the fairies, but you know full well that she got lost somewhere and never found her way out. Modern scholars have argued that medieval people actually drank lager instead of water out of fear of disease, but not everyone had beer. You were poor. You didn't have a pot. You didn't have yeast. You didn't have time to ferment. It's something called posset boiled water mixed with thinned yogurt and a squeeze of lemon. Sound appealing? No. In fact, it was lumpy, hot, and often fermented wrong. But sometimes it was the only thing that kept you alive. You stop by the old woman at the end of the village. She dries herbs and knows how to filter water with wood ashes. She pours you a small cup. It smells burnt and tastes sour, but at least it doesn't upset your stomach. You thank her and continue walking in the sun. By now, you realize that thirst is more than just physical. It is symbolic of the deprivations that pervade the medieval summer: lack of water, lack of rest, lack of hope, and the scariest thing, you find yourself getting used to all of this. Your throat is dry, your lips are cracked, your tongue is sticky, but you keep going. 'Cause if you don't, you'll be the next corpse floating down the well. You're stumbling across the churchyard when a sudden pain hits your stomach. It comes without warning, like a blow from God, and there's no toilet to run to. In fact, the concept of a toilet as you know it today is still a long way off. In the summer of the Middle Ages, going to the bathroom was a matter of courage, desperation, a little luck. You find a secluded corner behind a broken stone wall. Fortunately, there are at least 2 other people doing the same thing. They just glance at you, then look down at the ground, silent as if meditating. Privacy is non-existent in this village, especially when everyone has to take care of themselves at least once a day. If your body is still functioning properly, you think of the so-called public latrine near the market, a big, crudely fenced pit where villagers take turns sitting and chatting like they're having a town meeting. But in the middle of summer, it stinks like hell. Flies are as thick as smoke, and the ground is slippery because you know. One time a kid slipped and fell straight in. They had to pull him up with a rope. From then on, the villagers called him the smelliest boy God ever made. You'd rather choose the corner of the garden than face the public. But there's always a risk: being seen, being chased by a dog, or worse, stepping in yesterday's excrement.
You recall what the carpenter once said, half jokingly, we live in our own excrement. Consider it your companion.
It's hard to imagine, but medieval people believed that relieving themselves in the open was perfectly natural. Some wealthy nobles had their own privy chair with a hole in it that led down into the cellar. But if you think that's a luxury, you're wrong. Waste piled up beneath them, and servants had to scoop it out by the bucketful every week. You've heard of a rich boy who foolishly shined a flashlight down to check and fell into a cellar. No one could save him in time. Real event you've read about? In 1183, a terrible accident occurred at the royal latrine in Erfurt. The floor collapsed, sending several nobles plummeting into the pit of excrement and suffocating. Historians still debate the veracity of the event, but the story has become one of the most famous medieval death by excrement legends. Back to you, finally finding a lonely tree stump in the field. You do what you have to do, wiping yourself with leaves because paper is too expensive. But when you stand up, you find that you have just stepped on a fire ant hill, and they are not happy. You hop around patting your leg, cursing in your head. Just then, from a distance, you see an old woman looking at you, frowning as if you have just ruined her cabbage patch. You just smile and retreat into the grass. Your body feels lighter, but your spirit is a little broken. There is no privacy, no cleanliness, no comfort. Can't even sit still for fear of fleas biting you in sensitive areas. Remember that rash from last week? It started on your butt and then spread up your back. Some people say it's the angry god of the earth. Others say you should smear it with mud. But mud can be even dirtier. You recall a strange fact you once heard from a traveler. Some large towns like London have people hired specifically to clean up the manure called gong farmers. These people work at night crawling down into the cesspools, scooping buckets of it into carts, and taking it out of town to be sold as fertilizer. The smell is unspeakable, and their average life expectancy is less than 30. You wonder if you'll live that long? How many more summers will you have to endure? Will toilets with flushing toilet paper and locking doors ever be invented? In the future, but that's a luxury. Now you have to go back to the village, where the flies are waiting for you. ... With wide smiles, as if they know where you've been, you return to the main market in the middle of the village, which seems to be the bright spot of summer, a crowded, bustling place, and if you are lucky, you will find something to eat. But just step closer. You understand why the villagers often jokingly call this place the land of smells. The smell of rotten meat, rotten fish, rotten vegetables. Sweat and grilled smoke blend together into an unmistakable foul mist, tilted. Wooden tables were set up in the open air. Vendors used cloths to brush flies away from the hanging meat, but the flies kept returning as if they had reserved the table yesterday. A piece of lamb hung in the sun since early morning, now glistening with melted fat, with tiny black streaks that you would suspect were maggots trying to climb the mountain. You inch closer to the dried fish stall. Fishy smell hits your nose, forcing you to take a step back. The vendor, a fat woman in a yellowish-gray shirt, smiles, revealing her front teeth, and holds out a fish that is as hard as rock, claiming it is fresh since this morning. You look at the peeling scales, the half-lost tail, nod slightly, and walk away. You try the vegetable stand. There are some kale and turnips, but most of them are bruised, have black spots, and smell like bad wine. An old man tries to sell you some dried onions, but as you get closer, you realize they are soft and mushy and smell like shoes left in a stable. Still, he says, these onions are good. They ward off evil spirits. You just smile and keep walking. The event that marked the year was a crop failure in the summer of 1315 that lasted until 1317, when unusual weather conditions made it impossible to harvest barley and oats. Some villages began cutting the young leaves of the trees to eat. People roasted tree bark, boiled wild roots, and of course, prices in the market skyrocketed. You remember someone getting into a fist fight yesterday over a piece of bread that was as hard as clay, hard enough to be used as a weapon? Historians still debate what strange behaviors the prolonged famine led to. Cannibalism? Eating shoe leather? Some accounts describe digging up the graves of recently buried relatives to make soup out of their bones. But not all scholars agree. But remember, there was an old woman in a neighboring village who was caught boiling a stray cat. She said it was a lucky ritual. But the cat was not so lucky. You continue to look around. Hunger makes you take a risk. You stop at a bakery. The cakes are small, hard, with crusts cracked like the desert. You pick one up, squeeze it, and hear it crack not because it's crispy, but because it's dried out to the point of crumbling. It's not moldy, the vendor says. Just a little old. You don't ask how old, your stomach growls, and you take a bite. The dry dough sticks to your teeth, breaking into pieces like clay, but at least it doesn't have maggots as you chew. You think of pottage, a soup of stewed vegetables that used to be the staple food of the poor. But this season, there are no roots left, and clean water is as precious as gold. Some people replace vegetables with weeds. Occasionally, the market has oddities, like salted goat heads, honey mixed with spring water, or apple cider mixed with mud. So they say you haven't dared to try it. But today there's nothing. There's just the smell, the shouting, and the hungry faces. You look at a boy gnawing on a dried carrot, his eyes sunken, his cheeks dirty. Then you look down at your hands. Only a few crumbs of bread have fallen. You recall a strange fact you once heard. Rich people in those days sometimes used flour, powder as a flavoring to cover up rotten food, masking the smell. So the guests ate it without realizing it. Perhaps the cake you just ate was seasoned in the same way.
Yes.
You swallow it, wiping your hands on your pants. It's not even evening. Yet, the sun is still blazing, and the market, where you should have found some hope, is now filled with the cruel truth. Summer is unforgiving. You see a man passed out near the stall, foaming at the mouth. Some people gather around, others turn away. As for you, you turn away, because you have to find water and avoid the flies. You turn away from the market, your hunger still fresh, and the itch returns. Every step feels like a small army of little guys are marching on you, biting, crawling, stinging. Summer isn't just hot and dirty, it's also the season for tiny bloodsuckers, mosquitoes, fleas, lice, ticks. You can't see them, but you feel them all the time. You stop under a tree and try to scratch your neck, where it's red and swollen like a cigarette burn. An old woman passes by and shakes her head. If you scratch like that, it'll get into your blood. She suggests you mix some cow urine with clay. You laugh and thank her, but have no intention of doing it. After all, you tried it last year, and it only resulted in more blisters. The bugs don't just itch, they bring disaster. Remember last week? Someone in the other village died after 3 days of high fever and pustules all over his body. The villagers said it was a holy curse. Another said it was a witch's curse. But you saw the signs, a bite on the leg, which then festered. And then suddenly his whole body swelled up red as if he'd been burned. No one had time to do anything. The body was wrapped in burlap and hastily buried in the backyard without ceremony or church bells. The most terrifying event you remember is the Black Death of 1340 wave that claimed millions of lives. While it hasn't recurred, people live in fear that a bite could be the start of the end of the world. Modern historians still debate whether the disease was transmitted by fleas on rats or by a virus that spread from person to person. Recent theories even suggest that Warming weather contributed to the outbreak. You don't know who's right, just know you're itching like crazy. It's not just you, the kids in the village are scratching themselves until they bleed. Some of them have a competition to see who can catch the most lice in an hour. The winner gets a prize, a boiled egg. You remember the laughter as the boy takes off his shirt, claps it, and holds up his lice-covered hands. 32. Last season's record. A drug peddler walks by, shouting lice killer, made from dead human ashes and horse grease. You don't know whether to believe him or not, but people buy it anyway. You look at yourself, your shirt is covered in dirt, your hair's matted, and there's a suspicious bulge on the back of your shirt. Could it be that you're about to be one of them? There is one thing you cannot forget. Last year, a little girl got a fever because of a tick bite on the back of her neck. People took her to a herbalist who decided to burn the tick bite. With a red-hot iron, the girl screamed until she was hoarse. 3 days later, she died of infection. People said it was God's will, but you know it was despair. You approach the fence, where several cows are hissing softly as flies swarm. Over their eyes, one turns its head, revealing a bald back where hundreds of bites have gathered. You see yourself reflected in its eyes, helpless, exhausted, surrounded by creatures smaller than a grain of rice, but with demonic power. You wonder if someone in the future will be able to live a summer without scratching, maybe without fearing. Every time a mosquito lands on their arm, maybe just enjoy the sun without seeing it as a threat. Scientists today have invented insect repellent, allergy creams, and vaccines. But you have only ashes, urine, and a fragile belief that you will live tomorrow. You wave a swarm of flies off your face, then keep walking. Each step is accompanied by scratching, soft moans, and the smell of bugs. Remember when you first discovered you had lice? It was a horrible feeling. But now you don't count anymore. All you know is, if the summer lasts much longer, your skin may not be yours anymore. You find a shady corner near the old chapel to escape the scorching sun. But as soon as you sit down, you immediately smell the musty smell wafting up from the ground and mossy walls. The shade is not paradise. It's just a different kind of sun. It's more intense, more oppressive. It's if you were breathing in the breath of someone who'd crawled out of a musty wine cellar. That's when you realize, no matter where you look, you can't escape the smell. The smell of sweat, of animal dung, of garbage, and of people living together in the complete absence of a sewage system. The smell of medieval summer is something that clings to your skin, your hair, and your memories. Something that even if you leave here hundreds of years from now, you will still smell it in your dreams. You see a group of people sweeping the streets in the corner of the village. They've piled up a pile of trash near the cowshed. Bones, vegetable peelings, rags, and things you wouldn't dare name. Ow. An old woman sprinkles ash on the pile, hoping to keep the ghosts away. The girl next to her wears a sprig of mint under her nose, but her face is still scrunched up like someone is pulling her ear. You've tried it before, tuck a scented leaf into your collar, but within an hour, the scent is completely overpowered by the real thing. And don't even think about bathing. Bathing in the summer is a rare privilege, and the idea of bathing regularly is even considered ... dangerous. Some believe that hot water opens your pores, making you more susceptible to toxins. It sounds absurd, but you don't have any water. To test it with an interesting fact that comes to mind is the ban on public bathing in Paris in the late 14th century. Not because of a lack of water, but because baths had become places of debauchery. Modern historians still debate whether medieval people were as dirty as they were rumored to be. Some records show that people used to bathe weekly, but then war, disease, and medical fears turned cleanliness into a luxury. You are certain of one thing: you are dirty. You look at your hands, the blackened nail beds, The dry, cracked skin like dry soil. When you scratch your neck, white flakes fall like snow. Once you tried scrubbing your hands with a pumice stone to get them cleaner, but then your whole arm blistered red like a snake bite. Human smell is something you cannot escape. Every time you enter a church where people gather, you feel like you are breathing in wet shoes. And the strange thing is that everyone accepts it as a matter of course. When you complain, people just laugh. Thank God it is better to live and stink than to die and smell good. Here's a curious fact. You may have heard from a traveler. There was a time when French aristocrats used perfumed handkerchiefs to smell instead of breathing real air. They would also put lavender in their hats or hide the herb in their shoes. But you only have one handkerchief and it's being used to wrap an ulcerated knee. Smells can even affect your sleep. Last night, you woke up in the middle of the night to the smell of something burning. It turned out to be a dead rat decomposing under your bed. You didn't dare go outside for fear of being bitten by stray dogs. So you pulled your coat over your head, covered your nose with a rag, and tried to go back to sleep through the buzzing of mosquitoes. Scholars debate whether the sense of smell has changed over time. Some say that medieval people were immune to smells because they grew up in such conditions. But you, a person with all your senses and never exposed to smells like this, are not immune at all. You may even begin to doubt whether the smell you give off is even human. You get up and head back to your home alone. Thatched hut where the smell of musty straw mixes with the smoke from the kitchen, and as you lie down on the damp straw bed, you suddenly think, if there is a next life, please let me live in a time when there is soap. Nothing fancy, just something fragrant. It's dark, but the air is still as stifling as a bakery. You've just lit a fire in the kitchen, and sweat is already beading on the back of your neck. Fire isn't warm. It's the enemy in summer. But without it, you won't have anything to eat. There's no light. Your thatched hut is dark, save for a few slits of light filtering through the rotten wooden walls. You blow hard to get a small flame going. The smoke stings your eyes. Your house has no chimney, so the smoke curls around the roof, then drifts down like an angry mist. Every breath you take is a cough. You feel like you're living in a half-burned incense stick. Today's food consists of only a little thin porridge water boiled from spoiled corn, mixed with salt and a few wild herbs picked near the grave. You have heard that summer is a season of plenty, when the grass and trees are budding and the land is bountiful. But you look around your house and you are hungry. There is no bread, no meat, nothing but smoke, mosquitoes, and flies. It turns out that bountifulness is only for those who have land, horses, and servants. You wonder why life is so lacking. Why the light is hot, the dark is cold, the water is dirty, the food is rotten, and even sleep is lacking. Last night you were bitten by mosquitoes so much that you woke up with a swollen face like you had been stung by a bee. No mosquito nets, no doors, no quiet. You dreamed that the nights would be cooler, more pleasant, but they weren't. Medieval summer nights were an assault of insects, barking dogs, meowing cats, and screams from the house next door where someone was running a fever. You heard the sound of running water, then a mumbled prayer, then silence. No one dared to go outside to check. The dead had to be buried that night to avoid draining ghosts. One event you may have heard of is the strange heat wave of 1540. Modern climatologists call it Europe's worst summer. For 7 months there was no rain, rivers dried up. People died of thirst, and in many places there was no time to bury the bodies. Everything rotted on the ground. Historians still debate whether this is a result of climate change or a coincidence with a period of unusually high solar activity. You've never heard of solar activity, but you know the feeling of your skin peeling off after a day of working in the fields. Your back feels like a shell casing. Your hair feels dry and tangled like straw, and your teeth ache from drinking too hot water from a wooden barrel left outside. Night falls slowly, and and the mosquitoes start to attack more. You take a sprig of rosemary, heat it over a fire, and fan the smoke around yourself to keep them away. This works for 5 minutes. Then you go back to scratching, fanning, sighing. You hear footsteps rustling in the yard. Is it a neighbor? A stray dog? Someone asking for some coal? You don't open it. You're tired. The tiredness of summer doesn't come from working. It comes from just being. Even when you sit still, doing nothing, you're still struggling with heat, hunger, thirst, countless little things that want to bite you. Here's a strange fact you've heard. Rich people sometimes hire people too, fan them all night long. They use peacock wings or soft cloth studded with silver to create a breeze. Sometimes they even hire people to rub rose wine on their foreheads to help them sleep. If someone were to rub something on your forehead right now, you'd hope it was cold water, or at least not well water full of sediment. You blow out the fire. The smoke still lingers. You lie down, head on the empty burlap sack, legs tucked under you because the straw mattress is too short. A mouse scurries across the floor. You don't bother chasing it away. Perhaps it's looking for some shade too. You think of tomorrow. More sun, more heat, more flies, more watery porridge. Nothing new. Nothing changed. The medieval summer did not progress, it just repeated itself. It's like a curse that continued forever. You close your eyes, but you still can't sleep. Someone coughs outside, groans, snoring, insects, and among all those sounds, you hear one sound the most clearly. Your heart beats slowly, tiredly, and longing for rain. You wake up in the mist, but the heat is there before dawn, not the scorching heat of midday, but a humid heat that feels like someone is breathing down the back of your neck. You open your eyes, your hair is stuck to your forehead. The old layer of sweat has not yet dried and is replaced by a new layer. The back of your shirt is soaked as if it has been soaked in a water trough all night. You step outside hoping it will still be cool, but the ground is already steaming. The roosters haven't crowed or the dogs haven't barked, but the flies are already up. They're swarming around the water trough, on the piece of dried fish you hung up yesterday, and on your hand when you rub your eyes. You try to wash your face, but the water you left in the bowl from yesterday is now thick. There's a film on your face, and a dead spider is floating there. You don't wash up. Instead, you quietly munch on a piece of leftover stale bread, then head out to the fields. The field is as dry as a dead man's hand today. Take your sickle and go to the remaining barley grass. But there is nothing left worth cutting. A few ears stand alone, empty kernels, brittle stalks that crumble to the touch like straw. This summer has killed the field, killed hope. You recall the great famine of England in 1257, when volcanic ash from Indonesia blanketed the skies over. Europe, causing unusually cold weather, failing crops, and turning summer into a season of starvation. Historians today still debate whether it was a global climate effect or just a local fluctuation. But for you, no matter the cause, hunger was the same. Empty stomach, dry mouth, limp limbs. You sit down on a rock, gasping for breath. The sun is rising. From a distance, you see other men plowing by hand, without oxen. They toil with hose and faith, as if they are digging down to find the lost spring. A man collapses in the middle of the furrow. No one comes to help. They just watch. You watch, because if you stand up, you will be the next one to collapse. You pull a piece of salt out of your pocket, a precious commodity at this time of year. People say that salt keeps you hydrated, but it makes you thirstier. You can't resist. You pop it in your mouth, the salty taste spreading across your tongue like a needle. Then you try to chew it, because chewing makes you feel like you're eating. Here's a weird fact you've probably heard. In medieval Italy, people ate clay mixed with herbs to stave off hunger. They called it dirt cake. It sounds like a joke, but when your stomach is growling with hunger, anything soft, chewable, and not going to kill you immediately Is a meal you remember an academic debate that a beggar recounted. Some scholars said that God gave poverty to cultivate faith. Others said it was because of human injustice, land grabbing, and food hoarding. You don't know who is right. You just know that you were not chosen. You were just born in the right place, at the right time. In the wrong climate, you stand up as the sun rises. The heat pouring down your neck like liquid fire. Continue. On through the dry ground, through the smell of rotting flesh from the barn, through the blank stares of the villagers. They don't ask how you are, because if you answer truthfully, you'll say, "I'm dying, but slowly." You arrive home, intending to find some shade to rest for a while, when you find someone's door wide open. Inside lies a woman lying motionless, flies buzzing around her face. No one enters. No one calls a priest. You close the door gently, not out of fear, but out of respect. Summer death is a silent death. It comes without warning, without tragedy, without fanfare. It is just a normal part of July. You sit down on the porch and take the last sip of water from the pitcher. It is warm, like bath water, and smells of rusty copper. You don't throw up. You don't have the strength to. You look up at the sky, thinking about rain, and then a clap of thunder. Far, far away, but loud enough to make your eyes widen. You stand up as if someone is pulling you by the arm. The thunder was no illusion. The western sky has changed. Dark gray streaks spreading across the silvery blue. The wispy clouds that have been drifting about all week now begin to pile up, forming menacing layers. The wind picks up. Real wind. Not the lazy, furnace-like wind, but a cool wind. A wind that carries the scent of water. You run out into the yard, looking up at the sky like a child seeing a miracle for the first time. The smell of earth rises from the ground, the smell of moisture, the smell of hope. The chickens cackle. Children run out of the houses, screaming and laughing. An old woman praying to the sky and laughing grabs your hand. Finally, it's raining, my child. The first drops fall like pearls. 1, then 2, then 5. You reach out to catch them. Each drop is a kiss of life. The water seeps into your skin, into your hair, into your mouth. Sweet. No more salt, no more smoke, no more human smell, just water. Real water. The villagers begin to bring out buckets, tubs, and pails. Some even use their torn hats to catch the water. A child squats in the forming mud puddle, playing with his hands as if he's never known drought. You take off your shirt too for the first time in weeks. Your skin is clean without scratching. But the rain was more than a joy. It was accompanied by lightning. One bolt struck an old tree near the church. The sound was like the sky was breaking. The earth shook as if it had been whipped. A child screamed. An old woman collapsed. But you stood still. For the thunder, with all its dangers, was still more bearable than the heat that had lasted all season. You look up at the sky. The rain streaming down your cheeks carries the dust, the salt, the sweat of days of survival. Each drop washes away a part of your memory. You think of those who didn't make it through the summer, those who collapsed in the fields, died in their homes, disappeared into silence. You're still here, soaked, hungry, and alive. The historical event that comes to mind is the Great Flood in Flanders in 1316. After a devastatingly hot summer, too much rain washed away all hope of rebirth. The fields turned to mud. Seeds rotted as soon as they were sown. Diseases broke out because of dirty water. Historians still debate, is rain a blessing or a curse? The answer is probably only understood by someone like you who is standing in the rain. Because you know, too much rain, too late, can kill an autumn. You head home, your hair dripping wet, your feet slippery. You cover your straw hut with burlap to keep the water from seeping into your sleeping area. As you do this, you wonder, will next summer be like this, or worse? Has there ever been a year when people haven't burned alive or drowned? Here's a strange fact you may have heard. Some people back then believed that rain was the tears of saints, weeping for the sins of mankind. So if the sky is crying, should you thank or apologize? You sit on the doorstep. The rain continues to fall. No one is cooking, no one is making a fire. All is quiet, listening to the sound of water hitting the roof, the leaves, the tired souls. You close your eyes gently. In the sound of the rain, the distant cough gradually disappears. The sound of mosquitoes is washed away. The smell of people fades. The smell of cleanliness returns, fragile as a dream. And you, in the middle of a medieval summer, can finally sleep a night without having to scratch. Medieval summer as you have lived through it in this story was not a season of blooming flowers or balmy afternoons in the meadows. It was a journey of survival, hot, smelly, deprived, and dangerous. From the lack of clean water, to eating rotten food, living among flies and lice, enduring the suffocating smoke of the kitchen, to finding a place to relieve oneself without damaging the fragile self-respect that remained. Every day was a challenge. You have trudged through the smallest corners of life back then, experiencing things that modern people cannot imagine. Each part of this journey is a slice of reality. No romance, no glamour, just the harsh reality of an era without air conditioning, without soap, without the concept of hygiene or nutrition, and just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse, the rain came like a miracle. But the rain is only temporary. Next summer, or the year after that, will come again, and the ordeal will continue. Thank you for following along to the end of this journey. Hopefully you learned something, or at least felt that your electric fan is worth more than an antique treasure. Good night.